The summit was electric. Cameras flashed. Leaders from every continent sat shoulder to shoulder beneath the harsh glow of studio lights. The world watched in real time. At the center of the long table sat Captain Ibrahim Traoré, calm, composed, Burkina Faso's youngest head of state. Across from him was Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, flanked by American delegates. The moderator posed a sharp question about the rise of African independence and self-determination. Trump leaned back, his voice booming through the microphones. He didn't smile, he didn't blink. Then he dropped the words like thunder. "Don't be too confident, Captain. America will always be superior to Africa." Gasps rippled across the room. Some tried to hide their faces, others stared in frozen disbelief. Traoré didn't flinch, he didn't even blink. But the room changed, the energy shifted, the camera zoomed in on his face, still, silent. His eyes locked on Trump's. What would he say? What could he say? America had just belittled an entire continent. On live air, viewers held their breath. This wasn't just politics now. It was something deeper, something personal, something unstoppable. There was no script for this moment. A heavy silence blanketed the studio, stretching longer than anyone expected. You could hear the hum of the lights. Even the translators had gone quiet, waiting, uncertain. Traoré leaned forward, slowly. The cameras captured every movement, every breath. But still, he said nothing. His face didn't carry anger, no rage, no panic, just something else, something that made the American delegation shift in their seats. The summit host, a journalist from France 24, looked visibly shaken. She tried to steer the discussion elsewhere, but the damage was done. The insult was still hanging in the air, like smoke from a fire no one could see. On social media, the clip was already circulating. Trump vs. Traore. Africa deserves respect. Who is Ibrahim Traoré? Thousands were commenting. Did Trump really just say that? Look at Traoré's eyes. Something's coming. He's too quiet. It's the calm before the storm. And still, Traoré waited. Behind him, a small Burkina Faso flag stood tall. Behind Trump, the massive American eagle loomed. But tonight it wasn't about flags. It was about dignity. And suddenly, Traoré stood up. Not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to command the entire world's full attention. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam his fist or point a finger. But when Captain Ibrahim Traoré finally spoke, the world leaned in. His voice was calm, so calm it shook people. "Mr. Trump," he said, "there was a time when Africans were told they were inferior. A time when our gold built foreign banks and our people built empires without reward. But that time is not today." The entire studio held its breath. Even Trump sat a little straighter. "When my people sleep on empty stomachs, it is not confidence we show, it's courage. When our children walk miles for water, it is not weakness, it's resilience. We don't seek your superiority, we seek respect. And if that makes you uncomfortable, perhaps it's not us who need to change." There was a pause, a deep, shattering pause. The crowd, silent. Traoré didn't look away from Trump. "Africa has nothing to prove to you, sir. But the world will remember how we answered this insult, with dignity, not hatred." Somewhere in the back, a delegate from Ghana wiped tears from her eyes. The clip went viral in under 3 minutes. But this was just the beginning. As Traoré sat down, silence still gripped the room. But in the third row, a quiet stir began. A young African woman, no older than 22, wiped her face. She had been silent until now, but her quiet sobs betrayed the ache in her chest. She was a student from Burkina Faso, attending the summit as part of a youth delegation. Her name was Mariam Ouedraogo. She wasn't crying because of Trump's words. She was crying because for the first time, someone stood up. Not just for Burkina Faso, not just for Africa, but for her. For her father, who still farms dry land in the Sahel. For her mother, who walked 5 miles to school as a girl. For the baby brother she lost last year when the hospital generator failed. She watched Traore, her president, sit still, dignified, and she whispered, "Thank you." Unseen by most, a reporter nearby noticed her emotion. He snapped a photo. It would become one of the most shared images in African digital history. Captioned simply, "She saw herself in him." The internet was beginning to shift. But the backlash? It was only beginning. Within hours, the clip had reached millions. News outlets across the United States were split. Some anchors called Traore dangerously confident. Others accused Trump of global disrespect. But none could deny. The video was everywhere. In Harlem, a high school teacher paused his civics class and played the moment for his students. In Johannesburg, a grandmother whispered a prayer through tears. And in Washington, Trump's team went into crisis mode. He hadn't expected backlash. He thought it would blow over. But something about Traore's calm, his strength, was disarming. On Twitter, someone wrote, "A man in uniform didn't raise his voice, and yet the whole world heard him louder than any army." At a press conference, a CNN reporter asked Trump directly, "Do you regret your words to Captain Traore?" Trump smirked, shrugged. "No, America's still number one. That's just a fact." Back in Burkina Faso, Traore was watching live. His face didn't change. But later that night, he sat alone in his residence. And he stared at an old letter on his desk, handwritten, torn at the edges. The name at the bottom, his father. That letter would soon break the world's heart. The letter was old, folded and frayed. It had been written nearly 2 decades ago by Ibrahim Traoré's father, a humble school teacher who passed away before Traoré rose to leadership. He used to read it in moments of deep stress. But tonight, it felt heavier. He unfolded it carefully. "Son, if you ever find yourself in a room full of powerful men, remember this. They may have money, they may have weapons, but you have truth. And truth, my son, is the only thing that echoes when the room falls silent." Traoré leaned back in his chair. The world thought they'd seen the moment already, but what they didn't know was, the moment had just begun. The American media had gone too far. A talk show host mocked Traoré, calling him the African with a speech problem. It spread quickly. Hashtags turned hateful. "Go back to your dirt roads. Africa should be grateful. He got lucky with one speech." Traoré closed his eyes. This wasn't just politics now. It was about his people, his ancestors, his dignity, and something in him was rising. The next time he would speak, it would shake history. 3 days after the summit, Traoré received a quiet invitation. It wasn't from another head of state. It was from a 13-year-old girl named Aaliyah Carter, a student in Detroit, Michigan. The letter was simple, typed on her school's computer. "Dear Mr. Traoré, I saw what happened on TV. You didn't shout, but I heard you louder than anyone ever before. My dad says I shouldn't care about politics, but I cried that night. Could you come speak at our school? I want my classmates to know what real strength looks like." At first, his advisors dismissed it. "Too small," they said. But Traoré picked up the letter himself, reading it twice. And then he smiled. "Schedule the visit." The American press didn't expect it. A foreign leader visiting a low-income school in Detroit. No limousines, no red carpet, just one man, and a room full of kids. He walked into the gym quietly. No guards, no speeches, just truth. And sitting in the front row, with tears in her eyes, was Aaliyah. holding a drawing of Africa. This would be the moment that would make America weep. Traore stood at the center of the gym, surrounded by students in plastic chairs. He didn't speak like a politician. He spoke like a father, like a neighbor. And then Aaliyah raised her hand. Her voice shook. Why? Do some people think we're not as good just because we're African or poor? The room fell silent. Teachers wiped their eyes. One of the boys lowered his head. He had heard the same words too many times before. Traore bent down until he was eye level with her. Little sister, he said softly, they think that because they forgot. They forgot who taught the world how to count, how to build, how to rise from nothing. But you didn't forget. That's why your heart is awake. They fear the sound of your voice, because they know the future speaks through you. Aaliyah began to cry. So did the teachers. Even the security guard at the back wiped his face with a sleeve. One reporter live streaming the moment whispered, "This is not politics. This is healing." The video went viral again, but this time, it wasn't anger driving it. It was love. Later that night, Aaliyah gave Traore a small gift, a folded American flag, drawn by hand, but with African kente patterns filling in the stripes. I wanted to show both sides, she said, because maybe they don't have to fight. Traore held the drawing in his hands, quiet. In my country, he told her, we don't fly our flag to show power. We raise it to remember pain, struggle, and unity. The principal of the school came forward. He said something no one expected. My students have heard 100 speeches, but only one man made them believe they matter. Across America, parents and teachers played the clip again and again. In Burkina Faso, the story dominated national TV. A woman at the market was overheard saying, "Trump thought he embarrassed us, but look at our captain. He's teaching their children how to see again." And inside Traore's hotel room late at night, he placed Aaliyah's drawing beside his father's letter. 2 pieces of paper, 2 generations, 2 worlds, and yet, one truth. But the storm wasn't over, because what happened the next morning would test everything Traore stood for. Back in his quiet hotel room after the Detroit school visit, Traore scrolled through his old phone. He wasn't looking for headlines. He was searching for something older. Buried in the audio files was a saved voice message from 2013. It was his mother. Ibrahim, if one day you lead others, remember what your uncle told you. Speak softly when they shout, because shouting means fear. But silence, that is the sound of a strong heart. She had passed just weeks later. Malaria. No hospital nearby. Traore played it 3 times. And then, someone knocked. His advisor entered quickly. Sir, something's wrong. The U.S. Senate just issued a surprise press call. They're blaming you for disrespecting a former U.S. president. They're calling it a humiliation campaign. It was clear. A political trap was being set. Some American officials now claim Traore stoked anti-American sentiment. The same man who had comforted a child in Detroit was now being painted as aggressive. But Traore didn't panic. He looked out the window at the night sky over Michigan and said quietly, "They've started a fire they can't control, because the truth always survives smoke." The next morning, Traore was asked to appear at a live U.S. Senate roundtable on international relations. The room was stiff. The media called it a diplomatic discussion. But everyone knew it was a test. Trump wasn't there, but several of his close allies were. One senator, pale with practiced arrogance, leaned forward with a smirk. "Captain Traore, isn't it true your country still accepts U.S. aid? Isn't it contradictory to lecture America while benefiting from its generosity?" Gasps echoed softly. A few American citizens watching from the audience nodded, misled by the question's trap. Traore smiled, slowly. He paused. And then, Senator, if a man gives you medicine after he poisons your well, is that generosity or guilt? The senator blinked. If a man takes your gold, your cocoa, your uranium, and then offers you loans with interest, is that charity or a receipt? There was no applause, just silence, and one loud breath. Then an African-American woman in the crowd stood up, shaking. My father died building roads in Congo. He never got a pension. But this man? He just gave him justice. The senator looked down. The clip hit 50 million views in 2 hours. Later that evening, Traore gave an unscheduled talk at Howard University, America's most iconic black college. The auditorium was packed. Hundreds stood outside. He wasn't wearing a suit. Just a simple African shirt his mother had sewn years ago. He took the mic, paused, and then began. I did not come here to win arguments. I came to remind the world of what was forgotten, not to shame anyone, but to wake them. Because there are children in my country who drink from the same river they bathe in, not because they are lazy, but because the system was never made for them. The room grew still. Some students started crying. He continued, voice steady. When I stood before Trump, I did not see an enemy. I saw a man afraid of a rising sun, because Africa is no longer waiting for permission to shine. A professor broke into tears. 2 Vietnam vets who had served in Africa stood up and saluted. Traore ended with, I do not want pity, I want truth, and in truth we are all equal, but in silence, we remain broken. And that night, America didn't sleep the same. He had just finished the Howard University speech. Still in the backstage hallway, Traore's phone rang. It was a U.S. number, unknown. He almost didn't answer, but something told him to. Captain Traore, said a trembling voice. This is James Lawson. I marched with Dr. King. Silence. Even Traore, known for his composure, leaned against the wall to breathe. I watched your summit moment, and I watched your face when that man insulted our continent. There was a pause. I saw Dr. King in you. Traore whispered, Sir, I am not worthy. But the old voice replied, No, you are. Because you didn't just speak for Burkina Faso. You spoke for every black child who ever felt small in a world built to forget them. They both sat in silence on opposite ends of the phone. Traore clenched his mother's old scarf in his hand. Tears finally fell. And in that moment, privately, he cried. But America would soon cry too. Because a forgotten mother, waiting in Harlem, was about to rewrite the world's heart. She lived in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment in Harlem. Her name was Mrs. Lorraine Banks, 67 years old. Her son, Jamal, was killed in Iraq at just 22. He served hoping for a better life. But the flag she got at his funeral didn't feed her. She had seen the viral summit clip online, and when she saw Traore again on the news, standing tall, dignified, fearless, she whispered through trembling lips, That's what my boy should have become. She didn't expect much when she sent the letter. Just a simple envelope, no email, no social media, just a note written in shaky pen. Captain Traore, you reminded me of my son. If you ever come to Harlem, come sit at my table. I'll make you the sweet tea he loved. The letter made its way through aides, advisors, then finally to Traore. He didn't blink. He stood and said, Book the visit. No reporters, no press. He arrived alone, knocked on her door. And when she opened it, she didn't speak. She simply opened her arms. And they cried together. Not for Jamal, not for politics, but for all the sons and mothers who deserved better. The world had watched the summit. They had seen the tears in Detroit, the wisdom at Howard, the silence in Harlem. And now, they were ready to speak back. A group of African students in France started the first petition. Demand public apology from Trump for disrespecting Africa. Within hours, It had 1 million signatures. In Brazil, black rights groups posted clips of Traoré's speech with the caption, "He spoke for us too." In South Africa, school children recited his words from the Senate hearing as part of their debate competitions. And on Twitter, the new viral hashtag took flight. "We're not inferior." Even some American politicians began to change their tone. One congressman tweeted, "I don't agree with everything Traoré said, but I've never seen a foreign leader touch our people this deeply." In Burkina Faso, villagers who didn't own TVs gathered around radios to hear his latest speech replayed. They cheered. One woman named Aminata, who lost 3 children to hunger, said, "He has made our pain visible to the world." But something was still coming. A final interview, one final message, one moment that would tear the world's heart open completely. The sun had barely risen when the call came. Oprah Winfrey wanted to interview Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Her exact words, "I've spoken to presidents, survivors, and kings. But this feels different." They met in a quiet, glass-walled studio overlooking the Potomac River. There were no stage lights, no audience, just 2 chairs. She leaned in gently. "Captain, the world says you brought dignity to an entire continent. But who brought dignity to you?" Traoré looked down. He pulled a faded photograph from his pocket. It was of his mother standing in front of a clay house. She was barefoot, smiling. "She taught me that being poor wasn't shameful. Being silent in the face of injustice was." Oprah's eyes filled. Traoré continued, "Trump's words weren't my battle. They were Africa's scar. I didn't respond to win. I responded because silence kills more than bullets." Oprah whispered, "You just taught America how to listen." That night, the full interview aired globally, and something miraculous began to happen. Even Trump's former critics started to apologize. 2 days later, without an official invitation or motorcade, Traoré did something no one expected. He visited the White House fence, alone. No cameras, no aides. Just him, walking slowly, dressed in a plain, dark coat. He stopped in front of a small crowd of tourists and quietly laid down a folded cloth. On it were 3 things. A photo of Miriam, the student who cried at the summit. A copy of Alia's flag drawing from Detroit. A candle. A man nearby asked, "Why here?" Traoré responded softly, "Because this is where pride often blocks truth. But if a child from Africa and a child from America both cry the same tears, then maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop pretending we are different." A woman in the crowd fell to her knees weeping. Another held her son closer. A nearby guard saluted him, not by command, but from the heart. No speech, no headline. But that photo, Traoré kneeling at the White House fence, became the most shared image in the world, and the caption beneath it simply read, "A continent stood without shouting." His plane was set to leave in 4 hours, but Traoré made one last stop. A live global youth conference beamed into classrooms across 92 countries. He stood in front of thousands of children, some barefoot, some in suits. And then he said, "When I was your age, my shoes had holes, but my mother patched them with hope." He looked directly into the camera. "I'm not here to make Africa great. Africa has always been great. I'm here so the world never forgets it again." Tears fell freely in the crowd. A teacher in Kenya fainted. A girl in Chicago held her chest. Traoré paused, then whispered his final words. "And if one day you feel small in a big room, remember even the sun is silent when it rises, but still, it lights the world." The audience stood. No music, just tears and thunderous applause. If this story touched your heart, if you cried like I did, don't just scroll. Comment your favorite moment. Like this video to honor the strength of silent voices, and subscribe, because this is just the beginning of truth, speaking louder than power. Together we rise, calm, proud, and unshaken, and